Hello there. Hey, I'm Willard Scott. Thousands of years ago, a very wise man said that to everything there is a season. And even though our modern day life sometimes gets pretty hectic, underneath it all, that's still true. And over the years, I've marked the changing of the seasons with my old friend, the Old Farmer's Almanac. And I'm not alone in that custom. It's something that millions of other people in the United States and Canada do too. In fact, people like us have been using the Almanac for almost 200 years.
The Old Farmer's Almanac Video, Volume 1, hosted by Willard Scott, featuring Roger Welch, and special guest star Jonathan Winters. Volume 1 contains casting, tackle, and fishing tips with Bud Levitt. Maud Frickert with her very special pet vegetables. Learning how to pickle with Andrea Chesman. How to make use of your household trash with saving money when you grocery shop with Stu Leonard Sr. How the Old Farmer's Almanac predicts the weather. Gardening tips and gardening by the moon. How to use the astronomical tables with Dr. George Greenstein. And a whole lot more.
Hey, that's quite an introduction. But then the Almanac is quite an institution. We can't possibly cover everything that's been in the Almanac over the years, or even the features for just a single year. But that doesn't mean there isn't a lot waiting for us in this program. For instance, we'll find out how the old farmer predicts the weather. And believe me, it's not by using the moss on trees or the thickness of a caterpillar's coat. We'll see how to garden by the moon, discover how to save a few bucks on shopping day, share household hints and recipes from our correspondent Roger Welch, and a lot more. Why, we're even going to go to Maine and find out how to and how not to hypnotize a lobster. Hey, say there, old-timer, do you have any lobsters up there?
We sure do have fresh-caught lobster. Just take your pick. No, you don't have to pack them in ice to take them back to New York. That's a waste of money. And good ice, too. No, what you want to do is just hypnotize the lobster. Sort of puts them in a state of suspended animation. And then, of course, they travel real good. Sure, I can show you how, if you want to buy a few from me here now. Okay, it's a deal. Pick one, it's real active in the tank, then stare him right down, like so. Don't have to worry about his claws. Rubber bands on him, you'd say. You grab him right there, and where his tail meets his body. Mind them claws, dear. They're good eating, those claws, but you don't want to shake hands with one. They're smart, wicked bad if he gets a piece of you. That's where your firm grip comes in. Keep him so he can't twist around and get you. Kind of like holding a rattler with two heads. So let's say you make a good choice. You stare him down good, and then you get him right in your hand without losing a finger. Then what?
Well, I sure don't know. But you know, that fella claims that he learned how to put those critters to sleep from some politician. So maybe he really can. We'll find out later on. The Almanac once did. In fact, explain how to hypnotize a lobster. But most of the advice is of a more practical variety. Very few of us will wind up face to face with a lobster. But quite a few of us, and not just the Shakespearean actors among us either, often find ourselves hollering, "Out, out, damned spot." Gravy stain, you know. In many ways, the Almanac's like an old friend. Actually, it's more like a bunch of old friends who get together every year. And as I'm sure you know, in every bunch of old friends, there's usually one who sees things, well, just a little differently than the rest of us. In the Almanac, that's Don Bosque's job. Now, one look at his cartoons, and you'll know exactly what I mean.
Now, I've done a lot of cartoons for the Old Farmer's Almanac. But among my favorites, because I'm a car-oriented kind of a guy, old cars anyway, is this series called Chariots of the Gods. My depiction of the kinds of cars that former presidents of the United States drove. For example, here's a custom roadster driven by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Harry Truman was only human. The Buick stops here. John F. Kennedy stocked his Hyannis garage with Edsels. Apparently called it the Bay of Pigs. Richard M. Nixon should have bought American. Bug 'em? And Ronald Reagan has owned this Thunderbird for many years, but will no longer drive anything suspected of having a left wing. Bust the cobwebs up on blocks. And nobody knows what Jerry Ford tried to drive.
There's sure a lot of interesting things in those graveyards. I guess a lot of us feel like we've got some pretty interesting graveyards of our own around our houses. Our graveyards are chock full of household trash, usually stuff we just don't know what to do with, but we don't want to get rid of either. Well, I'm happy to say that Roger Welch has some ideas. Good ones, too, about that stuff that we'd all like to have go away.
Every year, every American, man, woman, and child, throws away 4 tons of trash. The Old Farmer's Almanac offers a lot of different ways that you can use that trash. In fact, you're liable to get into it so much that you're going to find at the end of some months you're out of trash. You have to go over to the neighbors and borrow some. For example, plastic milk cartons. You can cut the bottoms off of these and use them for heat-retaining caps for your garden plants in the spring and the fall. I usually cut the tops off of a few and use them for nails, bolts, screws, anything loose out in the machine shed. Eggshells. A bath of eggshells and vinegar will take the spots off of glassware, china. Coffee grounds. You can dry coffee grounds in a warm oven, sprinkle it on the litter box to remove odors. I always like to throw a little bit of that out on my fishing worm bed out here behind the shed. Keeps the worms awake when I go night fishing. Banana peels. You can puree banana peels and use the juice to polish silverware. I always keep a few old combs around. Use them to hold nails when I'm driving them so that I don't hit myself in the finger. I'm so clumsy I once hit myself in the elbow while I was driving a nail. Old gloves. If you cut the ends off the fingers of some old gloves, cut a few slots in it, run a belt through it, you can use it to hold tools while you're working. I've even found a use for the ends that you cut off. You use them for a thimble cozy, because as any quilter will tell you, there's nothing worse in the winter than putting on a cold thimble.
You got a toothache, dear? Well, you've come to the right place. Maud has seen every kind of ache ever invented. I've even caused a few myself. Now, there's toothaches, and there's toothaches. And what's good for one is not necessarily good for another. For your regular garden variety toothache, of course, you just have to trim your fingernails and toenails at noon on a Friday, and you'll be as good as new by dinner time. Of course, if you get your toothache on Monday, well, you might not want to wait till Friday to take care of it, I suppose. In that case, you want to run around to church 3 times. You want to be sure to get a church where they still believe in the Almighty. Won't count otherwise. Oh, yes. One more thing. You can't think of a fox while you're running, or it won't work. Or is it a fax that you can't think of? Best thing is just not to think of any words at all that start with F. And then you'll be sure not to think of fox or fax or whatever. Why do they make those words so much alike? Well, anyway, if you've got a really, really tough one, then you have to take old Monty's surefire, never fail toothache remedy. You get you a nice big Bermuda onion like that. You take a nice big slice out of the middle of it. Let it warm in the sun for an hour or so to really bring out the essence of it. Then you put it right over your ear on the same side as your ache. I hope the ache isn't in the front, because it can be a little hard on the nose in that case. But it never fails. You must always work the first time, because I've never seen anyone do it twice.
My favorite pleasantries are buried on the right-hand side of the Almanac's calendar pages. Things like November 4th, 10-foot floodwater, Mount Pelier, Vermont, 1927. Or December 9th, 14-foot snowdrifts, Vevey, Indiana, 1917. Or how about this one? June 28th, 116 degrees in St. George, Utah, 1892. There's nothing that mellows a hot summer day or warms a winter night like knowing that someplace, sometime, it was much worse.
You know, even with all the features and all the history and all the tradition, I still sometimes wonder how the Old Farmer's Almanac has survived for almost 200 years to become the most widely read almanac in the United States and Canada, while literally hundreds of others have come and gone. Now, what's the secret?
This is the Old Farmer's Almanac, the same publication that Abraham Lincoln used in the murder trial, the same publication that George Washington read, so forth. So we have to strike the balance between sort of the old feeling to it, but brand new information. We also have to strike a balance between serious, meaningful information to do with astronomy, to do with the sun, so forth, useful information to do with food, saving money, gardening, and wacky information. One of my favorites recently was, how to hypnotize a chicken, that type of thing. So it's got to be a balance, and that's what we're trying to get all the time.
The balance that is such an essential part of the Almanac's success is not the work of any one person. Instead, the whole Almanac staff gathers together to brainstorm over a year before the new edition will hit the newsstands. It is here that the pieces that will make up the next Almanac are chosen.
For years after the westward movement had either changed to railroads or something, you could see the deep grooves in the prairie where all the
I think
covered
they're still
wagons
there
were
in
going.
some places. I think I remember
That's
seeing
kind of
pictures
neat.
of
That's
it.
a romantic kind of idea.
It is.
I would love to do a piece on things you didn't know about William Henry Harrison, the guy who was only president for a month. It could just be like a one-page thing, like we've seen before. Odd facts about William Henry Harrison, the nation's briefest president.
It could be that there would really be records like from the White House on exactly what he did do during each of his 30 days as president. That's right.
Might be quite a bit.
Much could he
The
accomplish
wit and
in 30
wisdom of
days?
William Henry Harrison, a very slender volume.
According to a recent computer study, pigs are not at all amused if you say to them, "I'd like to fondle your sleeveless fur coat," but are moved to ecstasy if you say, "I think I'd swoon if you allowed me to kiss your limpid umbrella." In my experience, hogs like best of all the words suey, suey, suey. As Mark Twain said, what I like about science is the immense amount of return you get for such a small investment of fact.
The mystery of fly fishing, there's nothing to it in truth. All you need is balanced equipment. Make absolutely certain that your line fits the rod. Now, you can practice on your front lawn. You can go to the nearby schoolyard. You can go possibly onto a fairway at a golf course, anywhere where the grass is clipped clean. You don't even need a hook at the end of the line and leader. You can practice by simply throwing the line out there. I have a system that I call 1, 2, 3. You merely pick up your line, you allow the line to lay back there flat, and you never hurry it, remembering always that the tip of your rod is exactly where that line is going and where that fly or that minnow or that angleworm is going to end up in the water. And then you pick the line up very briskly and hold it 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Pick it off the water, let it sit back there level with the earth, parallel to the earth, and come forward. And another little tip. Don't ever forget the possibility of using a golf club on your casting hand. Why? Many times you can avoid cuts, quick hooks, fins on fish, or possibly knots. And secondly, it's a firm grip on the cock grip of the handle. One of the joys of being a fisherman, and if you're really smitten by the bug, you think in terms of fooling with your tackle. A couple of tricks with this. You know, you use a reel like this. Say you use it in salt water. Well, I learned years ago a little trick that if you just put this in the dishwasher, run it through a regular cycle, let it dry off, a little dab of oil, drop it in there, and it's just like the day that you first started to use it. A little trick, too, when it comes to taking care of your rods. All you need to do is put them in the shower with you. You got to take that shower after coming off salt water, soap and water, dry them off, and they're just exactly in the condition that the first time you took them off the store shelf to use. It's the end of the day now, and you got to think in terms of going home. That's always difficult. Two things to remember. One, you use the staff to get out of the water. Secondly, you carry your rod in the proper manner. You don't carry it with the tip ahead of you. You carry it in this position, so it's always behind you. In the event that you fall, you're not going to break your rod. Fishing is a great sport. It's a family pastime, something that can be done by every member of the family.
You get those possum fish out where you are? We got them here. They're the toughest, meanest fish that ever was. I don't care what anybody else says. They're so hard to catch and nobody ever landed one, except in my pappy. He could never prove it. To this day, some say he's talking trash, but I believe him. This is what he told me. He was out on the lake one day, and he couldn't get a bite for spit. He tried everything in his tackle box, but it weren't any use. After a while, the sun must have got to him because he remembered what Ma had told him about that new book, one that says if you talk to your plants, you'll get bigger vegetables and all. Well, he figured if nothing else worked, maybe he could talk a fish into his fish chowder. So he looked around to make sure nobody was within earshot, and then he commenced telling any fish that would listen how he had a wonderful fish stew cooking up on the shore with cream and potatoes and corn. But he still didn't have a fish for him. He said how appreciative he'd be if a fish would just sort of come along and make his day. You think that's crazy, huh? Well, not 10 minutes later, he got a strike. Fish pulled back once or twice, but didn't seem to have much fight in him at all. So you can imagine how surprised Pappy was to find an 8-pound fish, right as big as that, into his line. And what was even more of a surprise, that fish hardly even flapped around in the boat. It's just like it just gave up and turned itself in. Well, Pappy didn't recognize what fish it was, but he figured a fish was a fish, and he wasn't looking a gift horse in the mouth, so he headed for shore. He hit the beach on the run with that fish in his hand, limp as a piece of cooked spaghetti. He flipped it right in his stew pot along with cream and butter and potatoes. And then he went over to the stream to get some fresh water for washing up. While he was bent over the stream with his pail, he heard the strangest slurping sound, sort of a flop, flop, flop. He turned just in time to see that fish all full of Pappy's potatoes and cream, flopping itself back down the beach and into the water. All at once, it come to him why that fish hadn't fought worth a darn. He knew he must have caught one of them possum fish, and he also knew nobody'd believe him. And he was right on both counts. Nobody did believe him excepting me, and now you.
Remember what Judd Hale said back at the beginning of the show? That the Old Farmer's Almanac relies on a mixture of the old and new? Well, the almanac part of the almanac, the astronomical information, is very old indeed. In fact, the word almanac actually means a kind of calendar, and no almanac that deserves the name can provide anything less than the very best astronomical information for its readers. It's the heart of any almanac. And that's why the astronomical tables in the Old Farmer's Almanac are about the best around. In fact, they're so good that in several states, they're the official charts for state government use. Dr. George Greenstein is the guy who puts those tables together, and he makes sure that you can actually set your watch by them.
One of the few things you can count on in this world is that the sun is going to rise tomorrow and it's going to set tomorrow when the almanac says it does, and the same with the moon, and the same with the declination of the sun and the moon's place. We live, in fact, in a gigantic clockwork. That machine, that very complicated clock, is the solar system with all the cycles within cycles of the planets, the very complicated orbit of the moon around the Earth, of the Earth around the sun. And readers can track through the pages of the almanac the workings of this machine. Let me go over the astronomical calculations presented with you, focusing here on November. This topmost section summarizes the interesting things of the month. For example, up here on the 3rd, the moon is in conjunction, is particularly close to Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. This section also tells you interesting constellations, planets, galaxies that can be seen in the sky. Passing on down to here, the beginning of the detailed astronomical calculations. The moon is in its first quarter, for example, on the 6th of November at 9:12 in the morning. Passing on down to this detailed line here, which gives details of the November 1st's astronomical events. The first column gives the day of the year. It's the 305th day of the year. It is a Wednesday. These two columns here tell you when the sun rises. If you watch the sun as it sets here from where we live in North America, it does not set straight down but moves at an angle to the horizon. However, if you live down on the equator, it actually does move straight down, and so it gets below the horizon very quickly. If you live way up north, the sun sets at a very shallow angle. It takes a long time to get below the horizon. Finally, if you live on the North Pole, it doesn't pass below the horizon in the summertime and just skims along it.
The Almanac says that there's a law in Ottumwa, Iowa, that makes it illegal for any male person to wink at any female with whom he is not acquainted. And in Orange County, New York, it's against the law to look at a woman that way. My wife, lovely Linda, says that it's bad luck for any male with whom she is married to look at a woman that way or wink at her, whether he's acquainted with her or not. Real bad luck.
In New England, we have many whale watch ships that go out. These big ships with scores of people on board pay $25 a pop, I guess, to watch whales. But it occurred to me that not everybody can afford that, or maybe doesn't want to pay that much. So that's why we have Budget Whale Watch of Block Island Incorporated.
There you go. You're getting very sleepy. Very sleepy. Yeah, sure. Come on now. Take a look at the watch there. Go on. You're getting very sleepy. Well, that might work on people, but look at that lobster. He's as game as ever. Now, why this wrong way matters is that if you try to hypnotize people and it doesn't work, you just look foolish. For the lobster, if it doesn't work, you look foolish, all right? But you lost your dinner and maybe a finger or two in the bargain.
If you're having trouble with squirrels in your bird feeder, simply string a bunch of spools on a wire and hang the bird feeder from that. The squirrels will step onto the spools rotate, and the squirrel falls to the ground. And the next time you hang out your laundry, don't be surprised to find a bunch of acorns in your underwear.
One thing that we all do, whether we garden or not, or whether we live in the city or the country, is grocery shop. Now, a lot of people would rather go to the dentist than go grocery shopping. But the trip to the market is a necessary weekly ritual for most families. And over time, most of us feel like we leave more of our dollars at the counter and walk out with fewer groceries in the bag. Do you know something? There's some tricks of the trade that'll put a few more groceries in those bags for you for the same dollars. And nobody knows them better than Stu Leonard Sr., founder of the largest single dairy store in America.
Believe it or not, every year over 5 million shoppers come to our store. Every one of them are looking for the same thing, to save money on food shopping. There are a few helpful hints that I might be able to share with you that will make your food dollar go further. Come on, let's go in the store and I'll show you. I'm really a kid at heart. Every time I walk by, I press the button and hear the cow go moo. But there's another reason I brought you over here. I want to show you something. Milk. Take a half gallon of milk and don't just buy one, buy several and put them in your freezer and freeze them. And they're frozen solid as a rock, and you can thaw them out the usual way, which is to put them in the refrigerator for 24 hours or so, or to leave it in the sink for 7 or 8 hours. But we experimented and we found a simple way. Take and put it in a microwave oven for only 8 minutes. And then you'll take it out and shake it vigorously until the whole carton gets ice cold again. Open it up, pour out the milk, and you'll find out that half of it comes out. Then you can take the other half and put back in the microwave for another 8 minutes. But it's a real handy little tip because you can always have a few extra half gallons of milk in the freezer for that special day when you need it. Take this broccoli. It's 69 cents. In a couple of months, it might be $1.69. The trick is, now it's in season. So if you take the broccoli and blanch it, and blanching is nothing more than putting it in boiling water for 30 seconds, and then putting it in an airtight container. Put it in your freezer. And in 2 or 3 months, when the price gets up to $1.69, you can open your freezer and you'll have this broccoli just as good as the day you put it in there. And the nice thing about it, you know, blanching works for any vegetable. Here's a handy tip on packaging. You know, the bigger the package, the better the price. Take this 1.5 liter plastic bottle of water. It's 89 cents. But here is a handy dispenser that contains 2.5 gallons. It's only $2.29. So you get 8 times the water for less than 3 times the price. That's real saving. All you do is you take the container and you put it on the top shelf of your refrigerator. Keep the water cold anytime you want it. Open it up and it's right there handy for you. Never goes bad. I hope some of these tips have helped you. And you know, rich or poor, it's nice to save money. Happy shopping.
For company. They never run away. And when one passes on to the great compost heap in the sky, why, you can just go down to the ASPVA shelter, and that's the American Society for Pet Vegetable Admirers, and get another one. They're so clean, too. None of those messy litter boxes that cats have, or those diapers you have to put on chimps. I like them best when they're babies. When they get bigger, they can get so vain. You see what I mean? I mean, look at these two, Charlie and Zach. Charlie is the cucumber, of course, and when you listen to them going about who's the biggest, who's the roundest, and how many inches they are, my word, shame on you. Just pretend you don't notice them and they'll stop. Now, over here is Clarice. She's a carrot. You can tell from that hairdo. In my day, we didn't have any of these spike haircuts or whatever they call them, but Clarice has to be so passionate. I remember when she was a baby, and I saved her from being eaten by a gourmet. Now look at her. Well, just like children, you know. Break your heart if you let them. It's just so hard to know if you're doing the right thing. Now, Sidney here is completely different. He's the kind of vegetable that makes it all worthwhile. He was dealt a tough hand being born a rutabaga. But does he complain when the others make fun of him? You see? Not a thing. It's that kind of quiet dignity that really gets to your heartstrings. That's my kind of vegetable. Come with Mother, Sidney. Okay? It's time for dinner. Sound of a bell.
You want to hear something really depressing? To work off the calories in one medium-sized apple, you'd have to walk briskly for 15 minutes. To take care of one slice of pizza, you'd have to walk for 40 minutes. And to wear off a 4-ounce hamburger, you'd have to hike for a total of 73 minutes. That means if I started walking right now, I'd be on Social Security before I worked off last night's supper. I'd be just this side of Los Angeles, and I would have worn out 18 pair of shoes.
We saw one gardener a few minutes ago had a rather unusual approach to gardening, which frankly I wouldn't encourage anyone else to copy. Unless, of course, you have a particular fondness for rutabagas. But there are proven, easy, interesting ways that you can improve the yields from your garden. And believe it or not, they involve our old friend, the moon.
The moon, as it goes through the signs of the zodiac, passes through each one, and each one has a certain characteristic. We all know these 4 elements: earth, air, water, fire. But each one of the signs of the zodiac has these qualities, and we've found out through extensive experimentation that a water sign, for instance, enhances the leafy growth of a plant. Or a fire sign for corn, you would plant corn under a fire sign, and it enhances the fruiting aspects of a plant. Or a root plant in an earth sign, and flowers in an air sign.
When you put that much energy into not only digging up a garden and planting If you do it at the wrong time, you can lose the whole crop, and therefore it is not energy efficient.
If we take this carrot, if it had been planted under an air sign, which is a flower sign, you would have had a carrot that bolted right up to a flower and not produced any marketable root. Whereas if you till the soil, sow the seed under an earth sign and cultivate it and do all your other operations under the same rhythm, you'll get a carrot that looks like this. That's a nicely shaped carrot, beautiful color, will keep well.
We took the old adage from the Farmer's Almanac, planting with the new moon, picking with the full. And what we found with the group that was planted with the new moon and picked with the full, we found they were 25% heavier in weight than those that weren't. Now, this suggested to us that the observations of using astrology worked. And that's why they had been in existence for so many years. And farmers do use the Farmer's Almanac as their Bible.
This research comes out of the biodynamic approach to farming, which is using compost and preparing the compost with special preparations and using some sprays on the plants in the soil. And we do all this also within these rhythms to get these results. These practices allow the cosmos to penetrate into earthly substance and influence the growth of these plants. And if people are interested either in this rhythm of the moon in the various constellations or in biodynamic farming, they can inquire at the national headquarters of the Biodynamic Farming and Gardening Association.
Hiccups? Don't worry about a thing. I've seen more cases of hiccups than you can shake a stick at. No, don't shake a stick. That won't work. What you want to do is spin on a rock, then turn it over. Of course, if you have a severe case, well, that's different. Then you have to stand on your head and drink a glass of water while holding your breath. Might be a little hard to get the hang of it at first, especially if you tend to have a large nose. It's a little tricky getting the glass up to your lips. You can also try holding your left elbow for 7 minutes, not 6 or 8. It's got to be 7. Or if it's a particularly tough case you've got, you can combine those two remedies. Drink a glass of water standing on your head while you hold your elbow at the same time. That almost always works. You can probably see why. As a last resort, and it really is a last resort, take a metal wastebasket. These modern plastic ones just won't do. They just don't resonate properly. Put the basket over your head and have a friend, probably someone you owe money to, is best. Have them hit it with a stick for a while. Those hiccups will be gone before long, or at least you won't hear them anymore. If you have any other problems, you just give me a call. I'm always ready to help. I got my work cut out for me.
Did you ever notice a lot of people claim to be good cooks, but you never get to taste any of the stuff they brag about? In fact, you never even get to see the recipes. Sort of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Am I talking about somebody you know? Well, one man can back up what he says when it comes to cooking, and that's our correspondent, Roger Welch. And I, for one, would like to know what makes the difference between a winner in the kitchen and everybody else. I have a feeling Roger can tell us.
We spend more time in the kitchen than in any other room of the house, except for my daughter Joyce, who spent most of her teenage years in the bathroom. So it's important that a kitchen is a comfortable place for us, a place that we like to be. It doesn't have to be a big room. Some of the best cooks in the world have kitchens not much bigger than this counter. but it has to be a place where we're comfortable. We have to decide whether a kitchen is a place where we like to be alone or whether we can cook with an audience. And we have to have good tools. It's better to have one good knife, the best you can afford, than a bunch of knives that won't hold an edge when you spread butter. We have to remember that cooking is like taking a long journey, an adventure. It's not so much a matter of arriving at a final product as it is having a good time getting there. Andrea Chesman is the author of Summer in a Jar, Making Pickles, Jams, and More. Andrea is to the pickle what Stradivarius was to the violin. Andrea, what exactly is the magic that transforms cucumbers into pickles?
It's not magic. All it takes is salt water in a pickle crock or else vinegar in a canning jar.
What kind of pickles are we going to make today?
We're going to make some quick dills with vinegar in a canning jar.
What goes into quick dills?
Well, we have cucumbers, dill. This is fresh dill, but we could use dill seed or you could use dill heads. We've got hot peppers, garlic, salt, bay leaves for flavor, but you could substitute cloves. White vinegar, you could substitute apple cider vinegar if you wanted. And that's it.
Well, let's make some quick pickles.
I'm going to start with a canning jar. I like the wide mouth canning jars because they're easier to pack. And these have been sterilized, and then I'm just going to throw the pickles in. There's some big ones. The small ones actually come out the best. I'm going to throw in my hot pepper right now. And I'm going to choose some that I can try and fit in there. If they don't fit in, just cut them. This will cut, and I'll try and squeeze it in because I want to have a full jar. I guess I won't get that one in. And then I'm going to throw in my bay leaf and garlic. And I need 2 teaspoons of salt. The salt really rounds out the flavor, but if you're cutting down on your salt, you can just cut down on your salt there. And I need my dill. About 2 sprigs or a head of dill or a tablespoon of the dill seed. And then 1 cup of the vinegar. Canning funnel makes it easier to get it in there. This is the only part of the recipe that you can't tamper with. You need that vinegar to preserve it. And then I'm just going to finish it off with just boiling water. You have to be sure that the top of the jar is clean so that you get a good seal. So I'll wipe that off. And then I'm going to run a chopstick down in here to get rid of any air bubbles that might be hanging out. And then just put the lids on. Those will go into the canner and it will process for 5 minutes. Take it out and it's ready to eat.
That's it?
Not quite. It needs to develop flavor for 6 weeks to set it aside.
So after all this talk about pickles, I'm going to have to wait 6 weeks before I can eat one.
No, I'll give you one that I made earlier this summer.
Oh, great.
The thing about these recipes is that you can do them as your cucumbers are ripening. So you can make just a few each time you want a pickle, and it doesn't take much to do.
Thank you, Andrea. Delicious.
As good as Grandma's?
As good as Grandma's.
Great.
I'm a New England cartoonist, and you know, maybe you can take the New England cartoonist out of New England, but I don't think you can take the New England out of the cartoonist. So even in my cartoons that are seen nationally by a non-New England public, and most of my cartoons are seen that way, I think there's still that kind of tinge of New England in there. And there is a cartoon that hasn't appeared in the Almanac, but the Old Farmer's Almanac certainly could use it. It's their brand of humor. Cape Cod Antiques. Little old lady knitting, waiting for that next customer, and her sign on the wall, shoplifters will be killed and eaten.
An outfit called Priority Management Pittsburgh says that in the course of a lifetime, the average American spends 1 year looking for lost objects. Now, I know that can't be right because I spent most of last year alone looking for my billfold. They also say that we spend 8 months opening junk mail. Well, I maybe make up time that way because I don't open my junk mail. What they don't tell us is how many months of our lives we spend reading articles about how we spend the months of our lives.
I just love useful information. That's why I'm a weatherman. Anyway, in the weather predicting trade, us weather persons are always wondering how the old farmer manages to predict the 3 o'clock weather a year or more ahead of time, when I'm happy to get the next 2 days straight. Well, now I don't have to wonder anymore, and neither do you. Here's the Old Farmer's Almanac weatherman, Dr. Richard Head, with the answer.
The way I go about doing my forecast for the Old Farmer's Almanac is to first get current with respect to what solar activity has been going on the sun, and the effects on the solar wind and the interactions with our upper and lower atmosphere, and then tying that in with the various historical data that I have, bringing in the effects of how much permanent snow and ice cover there is, what the ocean temperatures are, what the soil moisture content is, and all of these sorts of factors that one still doesn't yet understand completely. I think the best way for a reader of the almanac to use the prediction is to look on it as a general outlook as to what they might expect at a particular locale as far as temperatures are concerned, as far as whether major storms might be expected or not, but not pinning it down to a specific date. We get letters from all over the country, in fact, people commenting how well we've done. We've missed badly on a number of occasions too, but I think on the whole that they're quite satisfied with the almanac, although we do, as I say, not get anywhere near 190% all of the time.
Gordon Bearfat Wimsat of Weed, New Mexico, has developed quite a reputation for forecasting the weather with bear fat. I suppose that's why they call him bear fat. And Gordon says that if the bear fat just lays there in the bottom of the jar, you can expect no change. If it starts to build up along the side of the jar, there's going to be a storm. And if there are a lot of specks in that bear fat, there's going to be a lot of wind. Gordon says he learned that from an Apache Indian. An Indian friend of mine says he can tell how tough a winter is going to be from how much firewood the local farmers stack up on the back of their porch.
Okay, so here we go. The right way to hypnotize the lobster is to rub his tail till he goes to sleep. Now, you see, just like this. Now, I know there are those that say you want to rub a lobster's tummy. You want to stay away from that tummy crowd. Either they're the kind of folks that have a lot of strange hobbies in the privacy of their own homes, you know what I mean, or they're from Florida, and they figure a lobster is like a crocodile, alligator, whatever they go for down there. No, it's not the tummy. You stay away from that tummy crowd, you hear? Now, you're writing this down, aren't you, dear? Good. So here we go. What you do, you kind of stroke his tail real nice. See that? Stroke him. Here. I stroke it this way. How's that? See that smile there? Huh? That's how you know you're on the right track. Now, it helps if you sing a little to him, a lullaby of some kind, but something with a nautical theme that they can relate to. I wish I was a fishy in the deep, deep ocean through. I wish I was a fishy amongst the other blue. Something like that. Tra-la-la, tra-la-lee. Get back in the water. You're not supposed to be on the land anyway.
Well, no one ever said that every experiment's going to work out perfectly. I will, however, point out that the article on how to hypnotize a lobster that appeared some years ago in the Almanac was written by former U.S. Senator Edmund Muskie, and he claims it works every time. And who am I to doubt the word of U.S. Senator? Well, sir, from the first edition in 1792, the history and growth of the Old Farmer's Almanac has paralleled the growth of these 13 colonies into a country that today stretches from sea to shining sea and beyond the Arctic stillness of Alaska and the tropical beauty of Hawaii. I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed our excursion into this special view of Americana. And for everyone at the Almanac, and for Roger Welch and Jonathan Winters, this is Willard Scott wishing you good luck and good reading.